Hey, howdy and hello. Welcome back into T1A. This is the Tank Teaches sessions. We are starting out with scoring today, digging in a little bit deeper, building that knowledge, really trying to make sure that we understand scoring, projections, and some of the other things that we have going into that. Let's get to it. All right. So, like I said, we are digging into some of the scoring and looking at what some of the numbers mean and how different formats can affect some of those numbers and rosters and all of that fun stuff. So, looking at our fantasy formats and some of the scoring, this is kind of what our overview for the session is going to be today. Just like in most games, the more points you have, the more likely you are to win that game. This is true in fantasy football. We'll take a look at the formats and how they affect scoring. The three subjects we'll be covering today is the format styles, some of the scoring, and understanding a little bit of the projections, what they mean, and kind of how to interpret player values in a very, very vague general sense. As always, if you're liking this, please click the like. If you want to subscribe and see what else we're doing, please subscribe. Leave us a comment, let us know what we're doing, and turn on the notifications. See what all of our new stuff we got coming. Here's where we get to some of the wordy stuff. So this is covering a little bit of what we've already talked about previously. Like I said, we're building knowledge, so a couple times that we hear stuff that becomes common knowledge and easy reference for us so that we understand fantasy football formats and what they mean. So redraft, you are going to draft a new team each season. You really don't care as much about the age of players. You're really just looking for guys that are going to hit that season, score you points, and then you're going to flush them. You don't have as much buy-in to your roster as much as you're just worrying about getting points each week. Keeper, kind of the hybrid of Dynasty and redraft. This is where you're keeping usually 2 to 14 players. Your draft is going to be once yearly, and it's going to have some vets that are worthwhile, but mostly rookies. Where redraft, you're dealing with everybody all the time, rookies and vets. And Dynasty, your usual draft yearly after your startup is mostly rookies and a few vets. So those three are kind of bridged together as like a normal formatting of football, fantasy football. There's best ball, which you draft a team at the start of a season. There are some dynasty best ball, but a lot of best ball is a redraft best ball. For each position, the highest scoring player will be placed in your starting roster. You don't have to do anything. You draft at the beginning of the year. If your team does well, you collect money at the end of the year. Daily fantasy sports. A lot of times this is based on game that's being played. You're picking players out of one game, or say like the best of all the players from Sunday. You're picking the best from all of that. You build a roster, usually based on a budget, and you play against other managers doing the same format. Daily fantasy sports is often a form of gambling. Before we get into a lot of the scoring stuff, there are some variants to rosters that can happen, and this affects how you draft, how you're going to get players, and what you're really looking at as far as the baseline of projections for players. Flex, multiple flex, super flex, it depends on the starting positional players. But all three of these can really change the value of positional players. So what I mean is flex usually has wide receiver, running back, tight end. There's a couple leagues I play in where they have one or two of those types of flex, and then another flex is just wide receiver and tight end, or it's wide receiver and running back. So they can mix it up just to put more value on certain positions. Another way they can do this is the points per reception. Say they put more value into a tight end, but they don't require you to start one. I know that's probably little more advanced one where we're at right now, but we will get there. And Superflex is where you can flex in a quarterback. So there's some leagues that flex multiple quarterbacks, some leagues where you're playing a lot of flex positions, or limited flex, which is, like I said, the two types instead of all three positional players being available. Traditional settings, you usually start off with a quarterback, a running back, wide receiver, tight end. There's usually a defense / special teams and a kicker. A lot of times the rosters are adjusted up to having start 2 running back, start 2 wide receiver, and a flex. But many variations are out there. There's IDP is a newer up-and-coming trend. It's been around for a while, but a lot of people have played a lot of years of traditional settings or gone into Superflex, and they played those for years. They just want something new and different, so they started doing defensive players, and it's really just to create a new challenge for managers, because now you're looking on both sides of the ball. You're looking for players that are good tacklers, good at interceptions or sack turnovers, mostly looking for them to be involved in that defense. Now we're getting into scoring. If a player does more than one thing, they're likely going to hold more value. If there's a rushing quarterback, a receiving running back, or even a tight end that also plays quarterback, that adds value to those players. What we're looking for when we pick players for our rosters is we're looking to find players that perform in a high yield or a combination fashion to get points. So what does that mean? High yield. So you want to have pieces in an offense that's on the field a lot, doing what highlights the players on your team. So if you have a team that rushes a lot, you want the running back. If you have a team that passes a lot, it could be tight end, it could be wide receivers, quarterback. If they're passing a lot, those pieces are going to be a lot more valuable. Sometimes the passing teams also have a lot of value in running. Make sure you're looking at offenses and what they're doing, also combinations. So kind of what I was talking about before, where a player has more than one featured trait. There's a lot of great running backs that were great running backs. They weren't great receivers. But you look at some of the trends now where your 3 down, your workhorse backs, common people that we look at as the top in the last couple of years here is like Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, where they're doing 15 rushes a game, but they're also looking at targets in the yield of like 8 to 10 plus. So they're getting receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns. You're looking at a combination of stats coming together that really bolsters that player's value and gets you more points. More points, more wins. So when you're looking at point per reception, PPR, or half point per reception leagues, running backs that have receiving ability are great value because they can get you more points in a week. Tight end premium, TEP. Tight end premium leagues usually have a tight end position where they get extra points to try to help bolster that position and make it exciting. Recently, the tight end has gotten a lot more involved, and we're looking at, as tight ends are coming out into the league now, they are more receiving based than just the traditional tight end who is going in as pretty much a 6th lineman. So now you got guys that are breaking away, put into the slot position, rotated out, put in motion, all of that fun stuff to focus on them being part of the passing game. If you're looking at tight end premium, make sure you're getting tight ends that are going to be used in the offense. Special teams players can score you points. If they return a punt or a kick, that's 6 points. If they also play on the offense and get a reception or 2, that's great. But if you need an emergency start, somebody's injured, suspended, something happens, and you're like, I don't have any players, but this guy returns kicks, that can be an emergency start and get you by for a week. But that's how you can find sometimes some value in players. Math time. Everybody's favorite. Most settings are going to have it where passing yard, you take the yardage, times it by 0.04, and that's how many points you get for passing yards. That is because if you did points the way you do for rushing or receiving, your quarterbacks are going to be scoring 30, 40 points each week just for having a 300 or 400 yard passing game. That doesn't include touchdowns or anything like that. And it really blows the balance of quarterbacks so much higher than any other position. So that's why their percentages are quartered down, and you're not getting nearly as much per yard. Rushing, receiving, a lot of times, like I was saying, it's a tenth of the points. So if they get 10 yards, that's 1 point. PPR, point per reception. There's half point, 2 point, all of that stuff in between. And you're taking the number of receptions and times it by the point per reception. Pretty straightforward, but we're breaking it all down here. Passing touchdown. A lot of formats are 6. Some formats are 4. If you are in a 4 point per passing touchdown league, rushing quarterbacks are huge because they're getting 6 for rushing it in. So you think through your rushing quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson comes to mind. He had a lot of rushing touchdowns as well as some passing touchdowns. But anytime he's rushing a touchdown, he's getting you 2 more points per touchdown. Rushing, receiving, return kicked, a defensive touchdown, those are typically 6 points, just like in real life. Let's go through and break some of this down and just show a mathematical difference of PPR versus half PPR. Your running back on the week runs for 55 yards, 5 receptions for 35 yards. In a PPR format, that is scoring you 14 points on the week. In half PPR, that's an 11.5. So how that's derived is all your yardage is going to get added together. So you have 35 plus 55, and that equals 90. You have your 5 receptions. That's going to be 5 plus 9, 14 points. That's your PPR. Same thing goes for half PPR, except for your 5 is going to be cut in half. So that's 2.5 points plus the 9 for adding your yardage of 55 yards and 35, which is 90, times it by the 0.1, so you're getting a tenth of it, and that's going to be your 9 points. Plus 2.5 is 11.5. A quick example of 4 point per passing touchdown and 6 point per passing touchdown. So your quarterback for the day throws for 305 yards and 3 touchdowns. For your 4 point per passing touchdown for that week, he has 24.2 points for you. And 6 point, he would have 30.2. Now say he runs for 55 yards. He's going to add another 5.5 yards on top of that if he does any rushing. So that is what I was talking about just a little bit earlier, is if you have a compound player where they are doing more than one thing, a rushing quarterback, it now makes your point total, say in your 4 point per passing touchdown, you just added in 5.5 more points. So now he has 29.7 points on a week versus the non-rushing quarterback who got 24.2. So it only sounds like, oh, wow, he's only got 5.5 more points. But that could be the difference to win you a week. I've won and lost games by less than a half a point. And that's that 5 yards that he fell forward. It's the 5 first downs that they went for it on 4th and 1, and he got an extra yard. So don't discount guys that rush at the goal line. Don't discount people that they are the team's 3rd down back and they rely on them to get a 3rd and 1 yardage. Some of those break away. Some of those are valuable touches. As we get into this, we'll do more breakdown of the math stuff. I think that's what I want to cover next here. Before we get to that, every time you go to set a lineup in a week, there's going to be numbers next to that player. I don't care what format you're on, ESPN, Yahoo, CBS, Sleeper, they're all going to have projections. And a lot of people live and die by what those projections say. Oh, they said this guy's going to score 20 points this week against this other team. And it sometimes happens and it sometimes doesn't. Projections are usually done by an analyst, or in most cases, a computer algorithm to produce estimations of scoring. This is not a guaranteed number that they're going to obviously hit because it's a projection, it's guessing, educated guess at best. But it's often a good indication of predictable stats for a player. Many things can happen that can make it positive or negative changes to these numbers, but no one is all knowing. There are a lot of factors that go into projections, and the more you play, the better you'll get at identifying factors that are going to help you react better to start and sit decisions beyond just what the format is telling you for its projection. The hardest statistic to ever predict for any fantasy player is a touchdown. You can find their usage and know about how much they're going to get of the volume of the offense and make a pretty good guess to that. You can never guess that, yes, this player is going to score a touchdown in that game. Oh, wait, they're not going to score a touchdown in that game. You never know. They could break one long. They could drop a touchdown pass. Somebody else gets the touchdown. It happens. It happens a lot. This is a very generic, basic guide for understanding a forecasted player's weekly scoring average and how to tier them. It's a lot of words. I'm going to work through that. If your player is scoring more than 18 points a week, that they are an elite player. They got a high amount of volume in their offense. They are consistent at getting touches, whether it's rushing, throwing, or receiving. Maybe they have a high yield of yardage they get a game. Going into really good players, usually they're averaging 15 to 17. If they're scoring anywhere from 11 to 13, they're working usually more in your flex and not so much in your starting or fixed position. Desperation players, you're usually getting 9 to 11 points out of them. You're playing them on a bye week, playing them during injuries. There's a late sit decision that somebody's sick, and so you've got to flex somebody. And these are the kind of a projection that you're looking at. Oh, they're going to get me like 9. Okay, they've got a little bit of involvement in their offense, and so this is what you're wanting. If you have a guy that's scoring on an average like 6 to 9 points, it's kind of a roster clogger. You don't really want to start him. You don't really want to give him away because he does have a little value, and so these guys make it hard to do anything with because they're just filling space on your bench. They might have future upside. They might have had good, previous seasons, and you're just waiting for them to come back. But if there's all they're averaging, it's probably a good time to make a hard assessment and analyze what you're doing with that player. If there's averaging 0 to 6, they better be on IR or injured or suspended because they're not going to do anything for you. If they're averaging less than 6 points a game, let's go back and break this down real quick. That's a receiver that's getting 3 receptions and 30 yards in a PPR league. That's a running back that rushes 50 yards and catches 1 pass for a yard. It's not what you're looking for. That doesn't help you. We've made it to the end of this one. We are going to keep going, and we are going to keep building. We've covered today a little bit of format, affected scoring, some scoring sources, and kind of finding some values in players, understanding projections a little bit, and we went over some projection tier-based player levels. Next up, we'll be digging into a little bit more of that fantasy math of understanding how players' points and points per week and what they're looking at previous season totals and digging into some of that extra math stuff so we can get smarter about understanding the numbers and understanding what we want to see out of the numbers. Well, that's all I got for you today, folks. Have a great one.